Okay, fantastic. So hello and welcome to today's webinar, a theme park marketer's guide to the future of revenue growth. I'm going to get straight into things this morning, and rather than run through an agenda, I actually wanted to start with some objectives. So my aim is to have you leave this webinar with the following three things. First, an understanding of the biggest shift in marketing right now and why it's happening. Second, an understanding of the impact this has on the theme park marketer and how the role needs to evolve. And finally, an understanding of the process of how to grow revenue in light of this shift. And I'll take you through a 5-step guide to doing just that. So if you're a CMO, if you're a marketing director, a marketing manager, a brand manager, a marketing exec, or have anything to do with theme park marketing at all, really, then you're definitely in the right place. And this webinar is for you. Now, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session, so please feel free to raise any questions that you have in the chat as we go along, and we'll pick these up at the end. But before we get started, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mark Locker. I've been involved in the attractions industry for 14 years now, and there are really just a few short things you should probably know about me. The first is that I'm an avid theme park visitor myself. So I've visited many different theme parks as a guest, both in my formative years and as a parent of 2 young children. So I understand theme parks both as a thrill seeker and also as a family unit. And I think the photograph on the right, where I'm on some sort of steeplechase ride there, probably perfectly captures some of those early thrill-seeking years. I'm sure you will agree. I'm also an ex-ride operator. So while I was studying computing at university, I actually worked at Alton Towers, one of the UK's biggest theme parks. I was on the front line as both a ride operator and a ride host. And in this photo, you can see me briefing some kids on the driving school attraction, my personal favorite, because we had these mini cars that we got to drive down every morning from the charging stations onto the track, which was definitely a highlight. And I also have a huge passion for technology. So not only did I play Roller Coaster Tycoon for far too long as a child, but I also taught myself computer programming and web development. And I actually started an online community for theme park fans when I was 12 years old, which went on to have thousands of members. So you can see the fusion of two worlds of technology and theme parks starting to take place from a very early age. And indeed, my passion for theme parks and my passion for technology are what led me to start Attractions.io, which is a guest experience platform for visitor attractions. And I've spoken about attractions and technology around the world at numerous events over the years. And now at Attractions.io, we're incredibly lucky to be working with some fantastic theme parks across the globe of all different shapes and sizes. You can see some of them up on the screen now. So we're working with attractions, I think, in 4 different continents, over a dozen different languages now. And it's all this experience working with technology, working with attractions, and importantly, with many different marketers at attractions that leads me to today's subject. And today's subject is that marketing is changing. And this isn't a particularly provocative statement, I wouldn't think, because marketing, of course, is always changing. It's always evolving. But marketing, I think, is evolving in a way that's particularly significant for theme parks and the wider attractions industry. And that's because one of the biggest things that's happening in marketing right now is a shift towards marketing taking ownership of the customer experience, and the customer experience being the primary dimension that businesses compete on. In fact, Seth Godin, well known as a marketing thought leader, of course, said something on a podcast a couple of months back that I think summarizes this pretty well. He said, if you're not in charge of the customer experience, then you're not the CMO. I don't know how to put it any simpler than that. And research by PwC has found that 86% of consumers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience. And yet, at the same time, Accenture did some research that shows just 7% of brands feel they offer a digital customer experience that exceeds expectations. Now, this trend is universal to all marketers, but what about theme park marketers in particular? Well, we recently asked theme park marketers about a number of different trends to find out what resonated the most. The trends covered things from personalization to the use of data. And what came out as number 1? It was the shift to focusing on customer experience. And that was no real surprise, but why is this? What is it that's driving this change? And what do we need to be aware of as theme park marketers? Well, I've thought about this a lot, and I know marketers love a good acronym. So when we look at the reasons, we can really think of the 3 Ds, which is demographics, democratization, and digital adoption. So let's start with demographics. Who here has heard that younger consumers prefer experiences over possessions? If you're sat there thinking, I have, then you certainly won't be alone, because there's been a lot of research on this. And in fact, millennials have been credited with kickstarting the entire experience economy. And for those who haven't read it, the Experience Economy book by Joseph Pine and James Gilmore is really the seminal book on the subject of this shift, a shift from our service economy to an experience economy, and something I highly recommend to all theme park marketers if you haven't read that. Now, the bottom line is that today's visitors have higher expectations than ever, and they value great experiences above all else. So that's demographics, but what about democratization? What does that mean? Well, when I was growing up, above the line marketing for the biggest theme parks was absolutely everywhere. There's TV ads, cereal packaging, center page spreads in newspapers, radio adverts, and it worked. It kept brands front of mind. So when you thought, what can I do this weekend with the kids? You thought, I know, I'll go to the place that I heard about the other day or I read about in the newspaper. And above the line activity still has its place, of course, but today it's a very different landscape. Now, if you are wondering what to do with the kids at the weekend, you might be more inclined to ask your friends on Facebook, or you might look up the top rated place on TripAdvisor. And sites like TripAdvisor will compare attractions of all sizes in one place indiscriminately. So attractions that could never afford such campaigns can come up against the biggest brands in the land, and it's really leveled the playing field. It's democratized things. And what is it that they're competing on TripAdvisor? It's the customer experience. The rating isn't just about the rides they have or the price you pay to enter. It's about the whole experience that the guest had. And this is what I mean by democratization. It's a leveling of the playing field, which promotes competition based on customer experience, not just brand awareness. And that's only a good thing, of course, for consumers. And that brings me on to, finally, the point of digital adoption. And this doesn't so much answer the question of why consumers value the end-to-end experience, but it certainly is a significant part of how consumers want to interact with brands. So the latest research shows that most consumers, 67%, according to a study by Nuance Enterprise, prefer to self-serve than speak to an employee. And if you think about it, we certainly prefer to instantly stream movies on Netflix and get tailored suggestions to our exact tastes, rather than go down to the movie rental store and pick up a DVD like we used to have to do. We also prefer to open up the Uber app and to tap and have a taxi arrive to our exact location, automatically be charged to our card, rather than the old way as well, which was to call up an operator, have a car dispatched to us, wonder if it's ever going to arrive, wonder if it's going to find you at the endless airport terminal or wherever you are, and then have to fumble around and pay with cash. So technology has made experiences better in all areas of our lives. And today's experiences, I think, can be described as things that are instant, they're on demand, they're highly personalized to us as individuals. And this is the standard that's been set, and it's what digital natives expect. In fact, one of the things that's touched on in the book, The Experience Economy, is that a theme park really directly competes with the likes of Netflix, these tech giants. And you might think, well, why is that? Well, it's because you're competing for time. An alternative experience to going to a theme park is watching something on Netflix, or it might be putting on my VR headset and stepping into a virtual world, for example. Now, we've already crossed the point at where most of our guests visiting our parks today are true digital natives. They have grown up with technology, and naturally, this is something that increases day by day. But COVID-19, of course, has also had a massive impact on this. It's really accelerated it. And according to McKinsey, we've had 7 years worth of digital transformation progress in as many months. And so digital adoption is the third thing that plays a big part in this shift. And all this means that there's a void between what consumers want, which is an amazing end-to-end experience, and what they value, and what many businesses are delivering today. And this is something that marketing can help to solve. And in fact, it's something that many argue marketing are best placed to solve, because the customer experience is your brand. And who should be looking after that? It should be marketing. So I want to transition now away from the kind of general marketing trends and dive more into the world of the theme park marketing sphere, if you like. So one of the problems is that if we look at theme park marketing today, efforts tend to be primarily focused on generating revenue through admission sales. So typically a park will be focusing on channels to drive admissions, and the landscape is, it's pretty complex. So you've got many different channels, partnerships, agencies to manage. It can be hard to measure the effectiveness of campaigns and the relative performance of each channel to know where to invest money. Resources, of course, are often stretched as well. And ultimately, you can have whatever admission targets you like, but if it rains every day in a peak period, or we have a global pandemic come out of the blue, then those plans can quickly evaporate, and it's not all within your control. And what's more, and this is probably the biggest thing, I think, is that admissions revenue on average is only between 49 and 61% of total revenue, and the rest is made up from secondary spend, things like food and beverage, fast track sales, retail, VIP experiences, photos, all that other stuff. So what if we could have a major impact on those secondary spend items as marketers? What if marketing had a more active role in the end-to-end guest experience? What if they could significantly influence all of the revenue generation activities across the board? And they were judged on revenue generation activity as well across the whole journey. There wasn't such a focus and such a weighting on the ticketing side. Well, let's explore a bit of a different approach. So here you can see the in-park experience, which is, it's worth pointing out actually that this is 100% owned and operated by you. So guests are physically on your premises and they make purchases with you. And these purchases drive typically up to around half of overall spend. So if we put this all together and kind of join the two pieces, you've got the various acquisition channels, owned, earned, and paid, leading to a ticket purchase, which then leads to secondary spend activity across F&B, retail, etc. And if you've architected the end-to-end guest experience to ensure it's as seamless and positive as possible, and you've really designed that, then you end up with happy guests at the end. And of course, happy guests drive loyalty, they drive repeat visits, which is even better if they entered via a paid channel, because you can now get them to transact again directly with you through an owned channel. And in essence, you're able to start a bit of a flywheel going, a concept which we'll come back to in a little while. So if we're basically saying that, the old way is marketers simply owning admission channels, and the new way is marketing owning the end-to-end guest experience, why isn't this happening already? Why don't we already see this everywhere? And I think it kind of is, but it really isn't. So, theme park marketers will often get involved in, say, in-park promotional material. A retail team, for example, might ask for some assistance on a retail offer. But the issue really is that marketing tend not to own the process. They're more reactive to requests rather than orchestrating the experience. And even more importantly, there are limited means of taking action here. So for one, how do you influence that on-site spend? Do you put posters up around the park? Do you train staff to upsell and cross-sell? It's difficult. And how do you measure it? These are analog things. At least with your website, you can track conversion rate, you can optimize it, you can measure it and report on it. So there are some challenges for sure, which leads me to the question of how can you really own the end-to-end guest experience? How do you tie all of this together? And so I'm going to take you through 5 steps that I think will help you to think about this at your park. So the first thing is to map out the guest journey. If you're going to own the guest journey, you really need to understand it and open up that shared understanding within the whole business. So to start with, you need to map out all of the stages that your guests go through pre, during, and post visit. And you can start quite high level, as you can see in the example here. So pre-visit, we've got research, purchasing your tickets, planning your visit. Then the on-site experience is arriving, parking, experiencing things, eating, shopping, staying over if you have an accommodation element to your offering. And then post-visit, you've got recommendations and return visits. So we can start high level, as I say, but once you've done that, you'll really want to break things down further by listing the actions your guests need to take at each stage. So this example shows one action for each stage, but you'll want to come up with everything you can possibly think of. And to do this, it really does help to get around a whiteboard, get some Post-its out and do this collaboratively. But if you're not in the office together, I can also highly recommend a tool called Miro, which is basically a virtual whiteboard. It's free to get started. So if you're still working remotely or want to collaborate over the internet, Miro is a great tool for that. But back to the main point. Once you have this list, you can then start to ask questions. And the questions you can ask are things like, what are your guests thinking and feeling at each stage of the journey? What points of friction could you perhaps alleviate? What opportunities are there to go the extra mile to drive satisfaction? So At first, we're looking through this with the lens of guest satisfaction. We're looking to find areas of friction, and we're starting to think about how we might alleviate that friction. But then next, in step 2, what you want to do is to layer on and identify those upsell opportunities onto the journey map. So what kind of things are we on about? Well, let's go through some examples. So this could be selling premium parking pre-visit, for example. It could be selling a skip the line pass for your top rides as you approach busy queues on park. It could be offering all-day dining packages to increase F&B spend per head. It could be offering photo passes to encourage more photo spend. Maybe you could do some high-end food offerings, because there's always a proportion of guests who will be willing to pay a premium for a premium offering, and that could apply to all sorts of on-site products. So could you look at a VIP experience as well? Can you offer behind-the-scenes tours at set times that you can sell on the day? And you can really think out of the box as well. Perhaps you could run a daily event or put on entertainment or a parade, and maybe that's not directly as a money-making exercise, but it's a tactic to keep guests around for longer, perhaps encouraging them to eat with you before they leave and spend more time in retail outlets. And as marketers, you know what your customers want more than anyone. You're creative thinkers, so you can really bring a lot to the table when exploring these different ideas. And at this stage, no idea is a bad idea either. What you really want to do is layer onto your guest journey map every possible way to make the experience better, increase guest spend throughout the whole journey. So once your journey map is furnished with your opportunities to improve the experience and increase revenue, step 3 is all about making sure you have the right channels in place to reach guests at each stage and be able to influence them. So a good way to do this is to list out all of your different sources of revenue, what percentage of revenue they make up for you, and then attribute touch points to each one. So for example, you might say F&B makes up 20% of our revenue, and the touch point you identify could be front of house staff who obviously serve you at the till, and self-service kiosks perhaps that you have in place within the outlet as well. And by doing this, it helps you to build up a real picture of where to focus efforts and what channels you have to reach, or what channels you have to use to reach your guests at every stage of the journey. And the real game changer here, especially as you look to influence that on-park experience, is to have a branded mobile app. Now, why is that? It's because the mobile app is the one touch point that happens to span the entire guest journey, from purchasing your ticket to providing feedback and everything in between. And it also, as you can see here, can influence every single source of revenue as well. And if you think about it, everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. It can make transactions through things like Apple Pay and Google Pay, which is highly convenient for guests. It can do ticketing with barcodes and built-in NFC. It knows the location of guests at all times. And it's a channel that you can use to alert people about things at any time, which makes it the perfect mechanism for reaching and influencing those guests who are on park. And Disney know this. You know, if you visited Disney World, you'll know the app is indispensable. And it's why they're launching Disney Genie, which you may have heard about. It's why they're phasing out magic bands. You can do everything through a mobile app. And as we discussed before, today's digitally native consumers expect these kind of experiences. So, well, taking control of the guest journey is without doubt a multi-channel approach where you need to consider a variety of touch points. Not having a mobile app is really going to be like, you know, trimming your lawn with a pair of scissors instead of a lawnmower. I think if you're going to take control of the guest experience as a marketer, you simply need to have a branded app that ties that experience together for guests. Nothing comes close to providing that coherent experience whilst giving you the data and the influence you need. And it's important to stress that your app isn't just about the interface that guests see, right? It's also about being able to leverage it to grow revenue. And to do that, you'll need the tools behind the app to run targeted messaging, to transact payments, to integrate with your existing systems across ticketing, food and beverage, photos. But once you have all of these things in place, it truly is transformative. And we know this firsthand as well, because we have customers driving 7 figures of spend each year through the branded app channel. So you've got your journey map, you've identified areas to improve satisfaction and revenue, and you have your channels mapped out. This brings us on to step 4, and that's creating meaningful connections with guests. So what do I mean by that? Well, if the future of marketing is all about experiences, then it's time to give your guests the VIP treatment. So rather than mass untargeted email campaigns sent to guests while they're at home, It's about highly personalized, meaningful interactions across every touch point before, during, and after the visit. Now, because the mobile app spans the entire guest journey, you can actually use your app as a tool to build up a full picture of your guests. For instance, you can start to answer questions like, how many times has a guest visited? Which areas have they spent the most time in? What type of food and drink do they like? What types of rides do they enjoy? Where do guests go when it's raining? How do queue times affect guest satisfaction? And with this information, you can then tailor messages to the needs of each individual and share targeted upsells, offers to the right guests at the right time, and improve that relevance and ultimately redemption. And the aim is that every single message your guests receive throughout the journey, even if it's commercial, is actually helpful because it's relevant. So for instance, what if you could alert a guest, as you can see the example here, who approaches a ride that has a long queue, and you could alert them with the opportunity to buy a pass to skip the line. And then you could let them instantly transact by Apple Pay and enter the attraction. It's not only a great commercial opportunity then, but it's also really relevant and convenient to the guest. And it's highly targeted to a specific pain point, i.e. they've just reached a ride they want to go on and there's a big queue. Or what if you could alert someone with young children in their group that's nearby a kids show that's about to start, and let them know that they might want to check that out and offer them directions to it. Again, these types of messages, both commercial and experiential, are highly, highly relevant. And it's not all about the app, of course. So as per the previous step, you will have mapped out lots of different touch points for different revenue sources. And the magic really happens when you start to orchestrate between them. So for example, what if you could tailor your pre-visit comms based on the behaviors from previous visits? So perhaps you could promote skip the line packages to guests that had previously purchased skip the line on site, or maybe an all-day dining pass to people because they only had lunch with you last time and you want to increase their F&B spend and get them to stay longer and also have a meal before they go home. So armed with a clear guest journey map and an understanding of each touch point, these are the types of campaigns and experiences that you can start to design and implement across your theme park. And by analyzing the results and iterating on what works, you can start to have a massive impact, not only on spend per head, but also driving forward KPIs like Net Promoter Score. Now, the final step, talking of Net Promoter Score, is around closing the loop. This is step 5. So once you're coordinating the end-to-end guest experience, you can then use the insights that you gather to further drive loyalty and repeat visits. And this is really the flywheel that we talked about earlier. So how might you do that exactly? Well, let me run through some examples here. So you could cultivate loyalty by offering, let's say, a discounted second day ticket or a discounted upgrade to a season pass at the moment guests are leaving the park and they've just had a great day and it's front of mind. You could take guests who came in via partner channels and be able to convert them and get them to rebook directly with you, increasing your margins. You could request reviews from guests that you know have had a good time, boosting your ratings on sites like TripAdvisor to drive more visits. And you can run ad campaigns that are actually based on the on-site behavior of your guests to improve that individual targeting and increase ROI on ad spend. Essentially, you're able to increase yields across different channels by knowing what individuals are doing, what they're interested in, what their demographics are, etc. So when you're in a position to think like this and operate like this, it really just unlocks a whole new world of possibility and a whole new way to look at things. And that's why I firmly believe that this is the future of revenue growth for theme park marketers. And it's something that theme park marketers really have the opportunity to grab hold of and be leaders of in their organization, to get collaboration across departments and to start thinking about things in this new way. So to recap, the 5 steps are 1, mapping the journey, 2, identifying the upsells, 3, picking your channels, 4, engaging with guests, and finally, step 5 is closing the loop. Now, before we get onto a Q&A, I just wanted to spend a minute telling you about Attractions.io. So the reason for that is that we built Attractions.io to help marketers take control of the entire guest journey. So if you're interested in exploring the topics of today's talk further, we love to hear from you. I personally enjoy just, speaking to colleagues, hearing about what people are doing. And so you're very welcome to reach out to me directly. The platform provides you with a branded app that puts everything your guests need in the palm of their hand, from a digital wallet and in-app food ordering to interactive park maps and virtual queuing, and it plugs into all of your existing providers. So it really does act as that glue to deliver a world-class guest experience. And you can, of course, use the platform to target guests with messages based on time, location, and behavior, and to design the kind of orchestrated guest experiences that we've been talking about today. So in short, it makes taking control of the guest journey straightforward. And to use the earlier analogy, I suppose, it's like having the lawnmower to help trim your grass. So please feel free to reach out and talk to me. It's a subject that I'm highly passionate about, and I'm happy to engage with anyone around these topics. And finally, for everyone who is attending today's webinar, we'll actually be following up with a PDF copy of a Theme Park Marketer's Guide to the Future of Revenue Growth, which you can browse at your leisure as well. It includes all of the steps and details on the activities that you can run with your teams and that you can use to help start you think about marketing and increasing revenue for your theme park in a new way. And with that, I'll be very happy to take some questions. So I'm actually going to look and see if we've had any come through. So we have one here. What levels of user adoption do you see for apps in parks? I think that is a good question, because I think, you may sit there and think, well, you know what, this kind of makes sense, but do people use the app? Does everyone use the app? If we deploy an app channel, is that going to be something that gets high adoption? And I think the answer to that is absolutely categorically yes, but it depends on a few things. So if your app, and we see many of these types of apps, right? But if your app is simply a brochure, or it's something that just has information on it that you could get from your website, then you probably won't see much adoption. Because what your app needs to be is something that's truly useful to guests. It adds value, and it allows them to, as I say, it brings together as the glue all the different services. So it is their ticket when you arrive. You can order food through it. You can virtually queue through it. All of these things together. That's what makes it really valuable. And then the more of those things you add on, it is that indispensable part of your day. It is like if you've been to Disney World, the Disney World experience. And we certainly have customers who have adoption that is almost every single person on park being influenced by the app. And so, yeah, app adoption is definitely up there, but it's all about taking the right approach, because this isn't about an app. This is about taking control of the guest journey, looking at everything that you need to do that. And of course, to influence people on site, you want an app, but you've got to design for that. You've got to do it in a way that is making it an amazing guest experience and giving you the tools to really drive things forward. I think we have one more by the looks of it, which is, how much effort or time do you need to implement this kind of approach? And I think that also is a good question. So there's no getting around the fact that, this requires really a shift in mindset, and it requires, I think, buy-in across the wider business as well. So, this is a way of looking at things that kind of, as I said at the beginning, goes against traditionally what a lot of marketing teams we speak to are set up to do, which is to really focus on revenue in the different channels. So I think you need to have a discussion with the wider business. I think it's an opportunity for you to lead on those discussions as a marketing department. As we said, I think marketing is the natural fit as a function within the business to drive this forward, because the guest experience is your brand. The interactions that guests have with you is what you need to be having control of and orchestrating. So yeah, I mean, it can take time, but I think one of the biggest things you can do is just look at what's out there in terms of the market now, because just generally outside of the theme park world as well, because customer experience and customer experience being such a hot topic for executives and businesses, and the new competitive frontier, if you like, and the new dawn of the experience economy, because of all of these things, there are tools and things out there that can really help to make this easy. So you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. You don't have to, invest, hundreds of thousands of into connecting all your systems or integrating things or to make that end-to-end experience coherent. There are things available that you can use off the shelf. There are partners you can lean on to help you get this implemented. And ultimately, in terms of the ongoing effort, so if you're talking about an app, for example, and that guest journey, the great thing about that is that once you've kind of set things up in terms of you've designed that journey, you've gone through and you've looked at what kind of messages and offers you can promote to what kind of segments. Once you've set that up, it runs automatically, right, on autopilot every day for you. So guests will be coming on Park, and based on their behaviors, based on what they've purchased, where they've been, what they've done, they're going to be getting these tailored offers that are relevant to them, these upsells, these things that make the experience better and increase the likelihood of recommending to friends, etc. And it's going to happen automatically, and it's going to be personalized to each person, and it doesn't have any ongoing requirement to keep manually, doing that work. So I think it's obviously an investment in time. It's a mindset shift that you need to get buy-in from the larger organization. But once you've overcome those hurdles, the ongoing sort of usage of these channels and being able to orchestrate can be straightforward with the right tools. And it's not really a burden. What I would say is that the outcome that you get is far outweighs the effort it takes to get there. Is what I would say. So I think that was it on the questions. I'd just like to thank you all again for attending today's session. As I say, we will be sending out a copy of this in PDF format for you to take a look through it as well. And thank you again very much for joining us. And I hope to be speaking and seeing some of you again soon. Take care.